Hey there, welcome to another episode of the Playing in the Sandbox podcast. I'm Tammy J. Bond, your host, and thrilled to have you join me today. We're going to be diving into a topic all month long around the power of disruption. Sometimes it may not feel when you experience those disruptive behaviors that there is actual power in them, and how do you use them as a leader? And I've got episodes outlined on this power of disruption conversation for you that I know are going to really be helpful in your walk as a leader. But here's something I want to share with you just as a little precursor to this whole disruption. You know, we are celebrating in the month of October our second anniversary of the Playing in the Sandbox podcast. I can hardly believe it. And we're going to do a little disruption here ourselves. We are recasting it, we're retitling it, and we're going to be bringing more content on a weekly basis to you, as well as we're now titling it the Leadership Sandbox. So it's going along with the Leadership Sandbox training that we offer. And we thought, you know, why on earth don't we just make it simple? And we want it all to be about, for us as leaders in the sandbox of reality, of life, of our teams, what does the Leadership Sandbox look like? And we're going to be showing you this month what our new and improved podcast episodes are exactly about. But right now, let's just focus on today, shall we? Let's focus on what we're going to be talking about today in the sandbox, which is all about disruption, those disruptive behaviors that might be getting in the way just a little bit, and they might be challenging us, right? So how do we now begin to transform these disruptive behaviors into something else? So in today's episode, I'm going to be taking you through exactly what those hidden causes of disruption are, and we're going to start uncovering what's really behind them. Because until we do that, everything else doesn't matter. We got to get underneath the surface. So kick off your shoes, grab your pen and paper. I want you to write down tips 1, 2, and 3, because I know you're going to take away 3 things today from the sandbox that you're going to want to implement, or conversations that you're going to want to have with your team when you get back into the office. So I will see you on the inside for the Playing in the Sandbox podcast. All right, let's dive into the hidden causes of disruption and how do we uncover what's really behind these disruptive behaviors. But could we just talk for a minute about some real world things that happen with disruptive behaviors and how they impact you? You know, I had an experience to have a conversation with a leader just the other week who was challenged, to say the least. They were challenged by someone who was coming into the workplace and causing not just disruption, but a level of chaos that wasn't actually supporting, helpful, and it was concerning to the team members because of the distraction that it caused. You know, disruptions come in all shapes and sizes. And this one in particular was rooted in something that was sort of alarming. I guess I'll say it that way. When people have outside pressures, and this individual that we were working with had some outside pressures in their home life that were causing them to come to work with a very angry attitude, and everything was an explosive moment, and it was just angry. That's all I can say. It was simply put. And the leader called me, and they texted me and said, "Hey, do you have 5 minutes for a chat?" And I said, "Yeah, let's jump on a call." I said, "Here's what I'm noticing." And I simply put, I said, "So what do you suppose is causing this employee to show up to work so angry and volatile and causing this disruption and even chaos in the workplace?" They're like, "I don't know. Like, we can't figure it out," because they're still getting their work done. It's just the manner in which they're doing it. And so I encourage this leader to go and have a conversation with the employee, because they were going around it, which we often do when we see disruption. We often, especially when it's tied to a behavior that's not pleasant, that maybe is angry, we can avoid those people because we don't know how to confront them in a safe and healthy way. And so I gave this leader some tools on exactly how to confront in a conversation that was safe for all, creating that what you've heard me talk about and Amy Edmondson does so well to speak to, which is the psychological safety aspect. How do you create that environment? So when these behaviors come in, you're checking on the behavior, you're checking on the person, but then you're also actually addressing what's going on, what you're noticing. And it's a great way for a situation behavior impact to SBI conversation. But before we get to anything around setting expectations or getting to correct anything, we just got to listen with empathy to hear what's going on. And this leader did that, and they contacted me back and said, okay, I got underneath it. There was some major family crisis happening, and this individual, they weren't leaving it at the door. They were bringing it into work and didn't feel that they could talk about it. They didn't feel they had the freedom to talk about what was really happening. So once we created that environment, it opened everything up, right? But see, there's other things that are the root causes underneath the disruptive behaviors you might be seeing. Now, we have disruptive characters in the sandbox. Dorothy the Destroyer is probably the most conniving of all of them. Certainly a narcissistic behavior pattern where they come in and they're smiling to your face, but then really working underneath the surface or behind the scenes to cause a lot of disruption that throws everybody off. And they do that for one of these key reasons. It's a root cause, which is, well, they tend to feel that they are the best person to get all of the jobs done. I guess I'll say it that way. So they come in and they can be very disruptive in the workplace and start destroying morale by their negativity, by their hostility, by their two-face, right? They're really kind to you one minute, but then they're really trashy, not talking nice to you the next, and or about you, right? And it just really impacts everything. So we certainly have that kind of disruptive behavior. We also have disruptive behavior of the silent type. The silent type are the ones that can come in, and oftentimes when we get underneath the surface with the silent type, and when I say that silent type is disruptive, it's disruptive because they're not communicative and they're not participating in the team environment, and they're sitting there really quiet, but you don't know what's going on. Sometimes these conversations expose one of the underlying issues is that the employee may be feeling undervalued or unheard. And so they come in very complacent, which is an absolute disruptive behavior. And they come in not wanting to participate in what's going on in the workplace. And we want to get underneath why they feel undervalued and unheard. What's causing that? Is it strife in the team? Is it something I'm doing as leader to the individual? Are we just not having our regular check-ins? What is that? Get underneath that, because that disruptive behavior of feeling undervalued or unheard leads to other things in the workplace. And it can lead to where right now they might be getting all of their work done on time. They might be delivering on point, but the more they feel undervalued, the less they're going to try to succeed. Because why? If it doesn't matter what I do, why do I try? Why do I work so hard? Why do I put in the extra effort? And I think undervalued and unheard is a tricky one when it comes to a disruptive, the underlying behavior or the underlying belief that causes this disruption in the workplace. Because until you really get the employee by asking them, so tell me, help me understand, what does feeling valued look like to you? How will you know you've got it when you've got it? When you say you feel unheard, and as a result, you're gossiping in the workplace about how no one listens to you, and that's causing strife among your team members. How is it then do we get, right? We want to get underneath that. So we want to hear the view from their chair. What does valued look like? What does being heard look like? And how do they know they've got it when they've got it? Why is it important to ask that? Because people give answers that are just, blatant or plain, or because they read it somewhere in a book and they think that's the right answer to give, or they tell you what they think you want to hear. We want to know from them what it looks like. So then you can make a note of that and reframe to them. So what I heard you say is, you feel valued when you receive public acknowledgement at team meetings for the work that you're doing. Yes, that's what I feel. Now I hope that you don't face that, but you might. That there could be that person There could be that person. And so you want to just repeat it back to them, reframe it back to them so that they hear you say it. Why is that important? Because then they know what? They know that you've heard them because you've just said to them what they're asking for. So that's one of the reasons for disruptive behaviors, feeling unheard and undervalued. The other cause that I think is probably, oh golly, probably one of the top in my mind is when we have a misalignment of roles, right? And unclear expectations. That clarity of expectations, y'all, is so important. Why is it so important? Because if your employee, your team member is coming into work and they don't have the clarity of what they do, why they do it, when it's supposed to be done, they're not going to feel good about what they're doing. They're going to start talking about it. They're going to start um, asking the wrong people potentially for clarification when it really does need to come from you. So we want to make certain that our roles, that the duties of the role are aligned to the values of the team, to the goals of the team and the organization, and that the expectations of how they deliver on those goals, right? How they deliver on the role or in the role that they're in, we want to make sure we're clear. And here's what this literally was just a conversation I had. You have an employee, I said to this leader, who's frustrated with you because they say you have not provided them with growth opportunities. And you're looking at all of the work that they have before them, thinking if they just get this done successfully, then of course there's going to be a growth opportunity that's going to come because I'm going to see that they can do their work. I understand both sides of it. But the reality is, if you haven't set that expectation of when you do these 10 things or you do these 5 things and you've mastered these 5 skills, here's what's next for you. That helps your employees see their path forward. It helps your team members see what they contribute to the team that makes a difference. Without that, we have a whole nother set of challenges and problems. Okay. So you want to make certain that your team member understands not just their expectations, not just the role and how it's aligned to the goals of the team and the organization, but their part in that. Meaning, how is it that they can continue on that path to go to the what's next? Align them and their role to the goals of the team and the organization. It helps them to feel seen. It helps them to feel heard, but it also helps them to understand the expectations that are before them so they know how to succeed. Because I'm going to tell you this, friends, when your team members come in and they're causing disruption in the workplace, they're bringing chaos into the workplace, they're not doing it just to irritate you. They're not doing it to cause for the sake of causing problems because they like to cause problems. They're doing it to get some attention on something that is a problem. And they just don't have the words or know, or we haven't created the space for them to know how to go about getting it. You have the power and ability to do it by powerful questions. And I'll go back to it. I'm going to sound like a broken record. You ought to be having 20-minute check-ins with your team members to see how they're doing, what they're doing. Let them lead those meetings so they're bringing to you what's going on and what more they need so that we can be resource providers and equippers so people understand their role and the expectations to succeed. It will remove disruption in the workplace, I promise. One of the other areas that is a key for disruptive behaviors is lack of recognition. And it goes back to the story that I was saying when they feel undervalued. Sometimes they just want to know that they want to hear that they're making a difference. And that recognition for some of us is really hard. For others, it's really easy. But third-party affirmations as a form of recognition, to go to Joe and say, Joe, I want to tell you what Sandy did this week, and here's what she did. And Sandy's in earshot. She can hear it. Or better yet, I give the acknowledgement of Sandy's work to Joe, and Joe goes, hey, Sandy, I was talking with Tammy, and here's what she said. And wow, good job. Way to go. Right? When we hear those things, it raises our level of well-being. Quite honestly, it raises the way that we see ourselves succeeding in the workplace, and it creates that feeling of good. And that lack of recognition is one that is so easy to quickly and consistently fix. Not just because you listen to this podcast episode, now you're going to go and praise everybody in the workplace, and then it's a one and done. No, get the cadence of it, build it up into you so that it becomes part of your normal. That's why I say I love when I start meetings out with celebrations. And I'm like, just personal or professional, however you want to celebrate, because I want to celebrate with you. And that also raises that feeling of being recognized for something good, even if it's that my kid, scored the winning touchdown in the football field. I can still be acknowledging that from the sideline in the meeting to go, that's fantastic. That had to feel really good. Yeah, it did feel really good. Okay, good. So there's that sometimes it's as simple as that. We make it so hard. The other piece is that workplace culture gets into being a big part of disruptive behaviors. When disruption comes, and especially when it's from multiple people, it really can be part of our culture. A lot of times there's clashes that are going on within the team, unmet needs that are happening. It's really another big one that we want to take a look at and spend some time on, so that we are making sure that we are meeting the needs of our people, but we're putting an end quickly to those clashes when they come up. That's really important, because those disruptive behaviors can have, they can swing a team, a performing team, a high performing team into a low performance zone really quickly. All right. So what's next? I want to talk about how disruption manifests in your teams. Sometimes we can see it obviously, and there's those things like, very aggressive behaviors like the story I shared about at the beginning, but they can take on different facial expressions and attitudes in the workplace. Passive aggressiveness is one of the biggest ones. We've all seen it. If you're a passive aggressive person, but you have someone on your team, they'll also kind of put it off as, oh, I'm just sarcastic, it's just how I am. No, actually, you're being passive aggressive. And if you have something that you really want to say, I'd love it if you'd say it. But that's how Tammy addresses it. You may not be able to do that. You might want to find a different approach to addressing that passive aggressive behavior. But I would say, while you may not be in my bold manner, you still can talk about, hey, I've noticed some behaviors that feel uncomfortable in the workplace. Let's talk about them. And you better be ready with examples, because usually people who are passive aggressive, they're not going to believe you unless you have actual real world examples. Let me just say that. Another way that disruption manifests itself is by over dominating behaviors. Remember, I was talking about Dorothy the Destroyer. I cannot wait to show you. It's coming. That's coming. You're going to see all of that. Get introduced to all of the characters in the sandbox. But she's a trip, man. But she is someone that is a dominating personality, and that's usually my experience tells me that person, it's really more of a confidence issue. They have a low self-esteem and a low sense of self-confidence, and so they over dominate in the workplace to make up for it. And so you want to get underneath that as well and stop it. And those people, you want to get ahead of it. You want to see it coming down the path, and you want to assume when you go into your leadership meetings, you have one of these disruptive behaviors, a dominant personality that's overtaking things and kind of running over people, steamrolling people. You definitely want to, when you go to introduce anything new, when you go into a team meeting, you want to bring the core leaders together to discuss, okay, we might be seeing some of these behaviors. Let's get ahead of it. What do we want to say? How do we want to approach it? What are the things that these people are going to need, so that we can lessen what the impact of those behaviors before we can get to them one-on-one. That's just something to consider as well. Lack of engagement and absenteeism is another one where people are where it can cause disruption. Obviously, absenteeism is somebody else has to do the job, because if Joe's not here to do the job, then who's going to do her job, and how are we going to get it done, right? And so that causes a ripple effect. Same with lack of engagement. Lack of engagement is a tough one to overcome unless you are really having consistent conversations with your team member that shows a disengagement, and understanding what's causing it. Sometimes the lack of engagement really can be the most simplest thing. I was having a conversation the other week with somebody who was talking about, pay rates, and they feel like they ought to be getting paid more. And so therefore that's why they're not engaged. And I just looked at them and I said, so why are you here? And then they listed off all the reasons why they were with the organization. I said, well, it sounds like it's creating a lifestyle for you that supports you and that you enjoy, and you don't want to go anywhere else because you enjoy this part of what you do. Yes, that's true. Okay. So if this is the pay that goes with it, is it worth it to you to have? And then I listed off all the things they said that was important as to why they're in that job, and instead of seeking a different opportunity. And it was just reframing it for them. Our team members, our employees can get so locked on to what they don't have that they're not even thinking of all the good that they do have. Now, do we want to make sure that we're fairly compensating and rewarding? And all of that is true. Yes. And we also want to bring them and their attention to what is working instead of always trying to solve for the what's not. Subtle sabotage and toxic communication is one of the other areas that kind of forms of disruption. And what is subtle sabotage? Well, that's your Sally, or your Susie the shovel stealer. I got to make sure I get my names and my characters right. The little saboteur is taking those little pieces, right, in the workplace, those little shovels that other people need to use. So if they can't find them and they can't use them, or maybe they have a piece of information that that if they shared it, yeah, it would probably help to succeed. This project to succeed. One of the other ways that sabotage happens is, and I've seen this sadly so very recently also, lots of good stories to share, where a manager who was moved from one team to manage another took information and didn't actually set up the person who's taking on you got team A and team B, right? So you got manager from team A that's now going over to lead team B, and team A is getting a new manager in. And the person who shifted teams didn't leave behind all of the key information so the new person coming in could be successful. Not only that, didn't spend time transitioning the new person into the role. They just were like, fine, I'm done with that team, I'm going over here. And that's another way that's subtle sabotage, because it ultimately came out that that individual didn't want the other team to succeed. They figured if I'm not there, then they shouldn't succeed. I'm going to put all my effort in over on the new team. Then you've got toxic communication, and that is, oh gosh, that shows up in so many forms. That shows up in foulness. That shows up in aggression. That shows up in, even that toxic communication can be nonverbal in our body language as well. And those can cause a lot of disruption that you want to get to underneath it. So then how, as a leader in your role, how is it that you recognize and address these disruptions? Well, as I've said many times, y'all, create a space where people want to talk to you. Have those 20-minute check-ins where it gives them the opportunity. You're not just checking in on their work, you're checking in on them. I call them wellness checks. Check in on the individuals, but create that safe space for feedback. Why is that important? Because unless we have a safe space for feedback where people can actually talk, they're not going to. And you're going to continue to have these disruptive behaviors that are going to tear down the morale of the team. They're going to tear apart and disrupt what good we are trying to do. And so many times leaders spin out in circles instead of just stopping and having some dialogue and allowing people to be frustrated. I don't need to fix it. Remember, active listening is I'm not listening to solve, I'm listening to hear, to seek to understand. Suspend judgment and seek to understand first, but create that space where your people one-on-one or in a group setting can bring you feedback. Get them on the walls, get them up on flip charts. I love flip charts and I love colorful markers. I don't like the ones that smell like fruit. Those are icky. So I do like colorful markers and I like flip charts, and I want to get people up on the wall talking about. Give them a powerful question, right? What can we create in this environment to design open feedback, right? Maybe it's that. Or I could probably say that even better. Let's see. Give them a flip chart and have them answer for the question, what do they want or need to be able to give open feedback, constructive open feedback? Constructive is key. I will give people the opportunity to have a 1-1-1, but I time limit it. And if they're coming to me with a problem, that's great. I am so excited that they exposed a problem, and I want to celebrate that. And then I want to help brainstorm what are solutions, right? I am okay when people come with problems as long as we have a solution. What I don't like is when people silently go behind your back and they know that there's a problem, but they're not speaking about it to you. They're not even maybe bringing it to the team. They might be talking about it with others outside of the team. How are you supposed to fix that? I mean, that's a disruptive behavior, but then maybe we haven't created that safe space where people can come and talk about it. It's your responsibility, leader, to create that space. And I want you to be very aware of your empathy in these conversations active listening in the conversations and suspending judgment in these conversations. Because if we go in trying to solve, not listening, and we're judging people for what they say or showing on our body language that we do, we're bringing the wrong kind of attention. It's not going to solve disruptive behaviors if we're interpreting those disruptive behaviors as something other than what they are. And I want to say this. We want to always address the behavior, not the personality, right? I want to go after the behavior as the root cause. What's the behavior that's disruptive? And how do we address that? Have your examples ready so that the person on the other side of the conversation can see what you see in their behaviors that might be causing the disruption that you're wanting to change in the workplace. So as a recap, I got to go back through and say this. It's important that you understand the root cause. Take time to understand the root cause, right? We want to understand what is not just the cause of it, but really understand what specific behaviors am I seeing that I want to see changed, right? Identify the behavior, the root cause of it, and then as your role as the leader, what's important, go in and address it, but create the safe space to be able to do that. Create the environment, get them creative, get them up on the wall on flip charts with markers, give them some powerful questions on exactly what it is that you're wanting to address and have them answer for that. That's it. That's all there is to it. That's how you tackle. But you've got to be willing to tackle the disruptive behavior. If you're not willing to tackle the disruptive behavior, then that's a whole nother level of problem and challenge that you're going to have. But it starts with you. So get your fancy little mirror, look in the mirror and ask if change is going to happen. Who's going to change it? And the person looking back is you, you. You're the one that's going to create the change. So there you have it. Disruptive behaviors in the workplace, they're real. They happen. Those personalities and behaviors are there. How you address the behavior is key to addressing and adjusting the behavior and shifting from disruptive to collaborative, which is where we're going next. So thanks for joining me in the sandbox. I'll see you on the other side. Hey, friend, thank you so much for joining me in the sandbox today. My hope is that you're leaving with some new tools, tips, and strategies to navigate your personal leadership, your team leadership, and that next bold conversation as you get into uncovering those disruptive behaviors in the workplace. And hey, it would mean so much to me if you would share this episode with a friend. Share and like it wherever you listen to great content, and maybe listen to it at your next team meeting. And it might help you to start to create some of those conversations you want to have around disruptive behaviors. Third-party affirmations go a long way in today's world economy, and I'd be honored if you shared the value that you gained from your time here in the sandbox. Now, remember that leadership isn't something that you're born with. It's something that you grow into. And I want to thank you for taking time to grow into your next level of leadership in the sandbox today. Make it a great day. We'll see you the next time.